Welcome back, everyone, to a very, very special episode of D&C Reviews. I'm Arjun. As you know, we also have Ronan and Hosong with us here today. And today we are doing a review of a very special album, an album that many may consider to be one of the best hip-hop albums of the last 10 years, and that is To Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar.
And when I wake up, I recognize you looking at me for the pay cut. Bahamas, I be looking at you from the face down.
What are everyone's favorite and least favorite tracks on this thing?
Okay, let me go with my least favorite first because that one I can choose really quickly. It's You Ain't Gonna Lie. I just thought the song didn't provide anything new and it was, in a way, for the album kind of worthless. It just kind of repeated the same thing. My favorites, musically, it's For Nothing. And lyrically, it's gotta be either These Walls or Black or the Berry.
Yeah, I those are actually really good picks. I think for me, my favorite track by far, and probably my favorite Kendrick Lamar track of all time, is the first track, Wesley's Theory. Just like by far, that's just an amazing track. And my least favorite track, I couldn't really pick one. It took me a really long time. But if I had to choose, I would agree with you. Like you ain't gotta say, it's like okay, like it adds to the theme. But I felt like every track had its own individual identity, and this one didn't stick out to me as much as the other ones. Like I feel like King Kunta had this identity, Hood Politics had this identity, How Much a Dollar Cost had this specific identity, but this one was like, okay, it adds to the album a little bit. It follows the theme, but I don't remember it as well. And the other one that I didn't really like was All Right. I feel like it's an anthem, it's a banger. People played it at the protests. Like that's what it's meant for, but it was too like trappy for it to work with the rest of the album. But maybe that's just me. It's still a good song, but it's just my least favorite.
Alright, so my favorite out of the album is also Wesley's Theory. It's just a banger out of the album. And then my least favorite is Complexion, A Zulu Love. Like it went well with the theme of the whole album, but I didn't enjoy it as much as
I love Complexion, man. Like I felt like Complexion was one of the most essential tracks to the whole thing, and Rhapsody's feature was really good. I really enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, the beat switch and everything.
The beat switch is fire.
Yeah.
But yeah, Wesley's Theory though, like that song is the most layered and intricate song I have ever heard in my life. That beat, there's probably 50 or 60 sounds like squeezed together to make that one beat. And going into this album, I knew it wasn't normal, but I didn't know it was this abnormal. I didn't come into this realizing it would be a jazzy soul funk infused album, and this first instrumental is the most funky jazzy thing, and it's so groovy, it works, and Kendrick is spitting about he's like, at first I first loved you, but now I just want to like he's talking about some girl or his friend or his mom or something. Turns out he's talking about the rap game in general. And when I found that out, I was like, this track is unbelievable because he's saying that he used to love the craft and he used to love the art for what it was. And now he's saying it's game time. Now I just want to make hits. I want to make songs. I want to make money. I want to do drugs. I want to get my feet wet into all of this. And it's not really, it still is about the art, but for me it's about like the money and like providing for my people and all that. So I thought it was awesome.
I also like how you use like different perspectives in the song. Like for the first verse, he's rapping as like from a perspective of any black community as a rapper, and then like having a successful come up. But then in the second verse, he says he's the Uncle Sam, which represents the government. And then the lyrics like, don't have receipts, oh man, that's fine, pay me later, wear those gators. He's just like trying to get those people spend as much money as possible and not warning them that the tax will increase the more money they purchase. And then it ends with like, "I'll Wesley snap your ass before 35."
Like how Wesley sniped your ass before 35.
That line was just too good. Yeah, so I think it's a dope track, and it's a great way to like set the mood for the whole
Also,
album.
like, something about beat switches and intros. Like, when you, like, same thing with Yeezus, like, when you have kind of like a nice, calm, pleasurable sound at the beginning, and then it just cuts out to this, like, complete opposite sound, right? It kind of makes you really concentrate on the song, and, like, you're, like, really ready to listen to the entire album.
Yeah. Also, like the first sound that you hear on this album in this track is some old, like you hear someone like putting down a vinyl, they put the needle on, and then you hear this track that says every N word, like every African American is a star. Every nigga is a star. And then it gets louder and louder and louder, and then it drops into this guy. He's like the four walls of the cocoon collide, and I just think that like the atmosphere, like the way that Kendrick is able to control the beat and the vibe and just set the tone for the album in the first 30 seconds is incredible. Also, at the end, you know how like there's those people chanting like in both ears when you're listening to it with headphones, like "Taxman coming, Taxman coming." I think that every sound, every lyric, every beat switch, every sample is used in this album is so intentional, and that only makes me respect it more. Yeah. And then for free, the next track, the second track on every single album is supposed to be like the banger of the album, you know? Like for
As
Drake,
mentioned
Scorpion.
previously, yeah.
Exactly. As Drake in Scorpion, it was nonstop. Everyone was like playing that shit. And this guy does spoken word poetry over a piano, a trumpet, and a sax. That's it. There's no drums or anything like that until maybe the second half of the track, where it's not even like a bass and a snare. It's just a bunch of like shots on the rim. And I was so taken aback by this, and I was like, "What is this guy doing?" He's saying like, "This dick ain't free." I was like, What is this guy doing?" Like he, and then when it took me a minute to understand it, and the first 30 seconds of the track is like this girl screaming at him. He's like, "You're broke. I can't you. I found a new man. Like he's much better than you. He's able to like cop me all this shit, and you're not doing anything for me." And I think I may be completely wrong. I may be interpreting this in completely the opposite way that he wanted to other people to interpret it. But I think it's how that's representative of how black people, and especially like black rappers, are treated by America as a whole, as well as by their labels in a way, because um the the record label is like, if you don't make this many albums in this many years, we will drop you off the label and we will screw you over. We own all of your music, so there's no way that you're going to make any real cash off of this. And it also relates to how America is treating black people, because they're just like screwing them over and saying like, I'm gonna like, if you don't provide for me what I want, if you don't find a job, if you don't do this, if you don't do that, we're gonna screw you over and you're just done. I'm gonna move on to the next person. To which he says like, "This dick ain't free" multiple times throughout the track, which is basically saying that he's confident, and he's saying, "You can't take advantage of me. Like you gotta pay for my dick." And his dick is like his his talent, who he is as like a black man. He's saying that you could pay for it, you could do all of this in exchange for it, but I'm not just gonna like be your pawn to make money or to be taken advantage of. And I think that that message is super powerful, and it runs throughout the entire album.
as mentioned with Kanye New Slaves, like they're currently used as consumer slaves pretty much, like um with the drugs and the alcohol and the bling and like the jewelry and all that. Like currently I'm not sure, like correct me if I'm wrong, but for like let's say for like a person, according to Kendrick, a person that comes out of Compton, their vision of success is the diamonds and the chains and all that. But I feel like that's like a kind of a narrative that Uncle Sam implemented into the black community.
Yeah, I think you're right. But success is so subjective. I think that what he's saying is, I am who I am, and I want what I want to be happy, and there's nothing that you can do to change that or alter my perspective. It's sort of like a power move in that way.
In a way, black people have never really experienced like a lot of people haven't really experienced success in America. So I feel like America had to write the narrative or describe to African American people back in like before in history like what success looks like, and then they painted this picture of consumerism because that's what America wanted out of the people. So yeah, in a way, that's so kind of brainwashing, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. He references like 40 acres and a mule. He references all these historical acts and symbols that came after the civil rights movement and after slavery was abolished. Um, yeah, there's a lot of imagery in this track. I think that for like a 2 minute track, this is incredible. It adds to the album and it has its own identity. It's literally spoken word. His flow, because there's no beat, there's no like tempo, like there's no like direct tempo in this track. He's able to just freelance it, and it's pretty beautiful. Yeah, then you got like the bangers, King Kunta and All Right. King Kunta's good. I think it's him just adding on to that confidence that he already established in the previous track, and then he's just going off. He's just being confident. He's like, where was you at? And now I'm up, so it doesn't really matter like where you are right now. I don't care. And All Right, it's just like that feeling of reassurance. Like we're just gonna be all right. Like it doesn't really matter what they do. It's just gonna be calm.
Wait, do
Um,
you guys know why Kendrick called King Kunta King Kunta?
yeah, because of Kunta Kinte and Roots.
Yeah,
I thought that
found
was
that really
super dope.
cool. Yeah,
That's super dope. I remember when we watched Ronan, like we watched like 2 episodes of Roots in like fifth grade or something, and then like there was like Kunta Kinte obviously, and then I don't know why, but as soon as I saw the title, the track title King Kunta, I was like, oh shit, would you look at that, you know? And then the track was amazing. So, and then we had the poem. The poem is incredible. So he starts off after every single track. He recites this poem, which starts as "I remember you was conflicted, misusing your influence. I did the same." And that poem runs throughout the entire album. It starts at the end of King Kunta, I believe. And the line that like he says the poem, it's quite a long poem, but he breaks it into bits and pieces, line by line, phrase by phrase. And every single phrase that he says pertains to, so he says the line of the poem at the end of every song, and he says, "I remember you was conflicted," and then the song that follows in the next track, that "I remember you was conflicted" line applies to the theme of that track as a whole. And he's like, "I'm screaming in the hotel," and then "You," which is one of the best, most incredible tracks on the album, starts playing, and it just works. It works. It keeps going in and out. He gains confidence. He loses confidence. He talks about this character like Lucy, who turns out to be like the devil, which is like shit. And then it all comes together at the very end in Mortal Man, where even though it's like quite a long track, he's like in Mortal Man, he's saying when shit hit the fan, is you still a fan? Just like questioning like, are you really with me, or are you just here for like for shits, right? And at the end of Mortal Man, it sort of cuts off, and I looked at how much time there was left on the track. There was 3 minutes or 2.5 minutes left on the track. I'm like, the f is he gonna do with this much time? And it's a 12-minute track. And then he starts reciting the whole entire poem, which just sort of brings the album all together and just like it's beautiful. The poem is it's so good. It's so substantial. And then all of a sudden he's like, all right, I'm thinking about calling this poem like this and this. And I'm like, he's having a conversation with someone. I was like, who's he having a conversation with? Turns out Tupac is on the other side of the conversation and he's talking to Tupac. And when I saw this, I was like, I was I was so surprised. I was like on a car ride when I heard this track for the first time when we were gonna review this album, and I was just so taken aback. And the fact, like, this isn't no like he didn't take Tupac's voice and like piece it together by each syllable or some shit like that. This is a real interview of Tupac, a very rare real interview of Tupac, and he bought the rights to all the audio, and he wrote the questions according to what Tupac was saying, and they're just having a natural or organic conversation about the rap game. And Tupac talks about like the ground, which is like the poor people or the black people of America, who are sort of the foundation of America's success, and they're just going back and forth. They're having a laugh, and I just think that is the biggest mind of all time, and
All
it's the
time.
greatest all time, the greatest conclusion to one of the best albums of the last 10 years. I think that the track Mortal Man is incredible, and just the whole idea of the poem going through every single track throughout the entire album, only to just like face plant at the very end and lead us to this conversation between basically like two Compton rappers who have been through some shit and they're just talking it out. And I think that it's beautiful. It's really sad in a way, and it's so it just brings the album to such a nice closing point for the album. Um, just like the themes that run through this shit, man. Like how much a dollar costs. Like that track is crazy.
I have some personal connection to that, you
Oof.
know?
Go off,
Oh,
go
let's
off, go
get it.
off.
Because, you
Let's
know,
see it, let's see it.
this is like a storytelling track. It's about him visiting South Africa, you know? Kendrick meets homeless guy in a gas station, like just begs him for money, like 10 rand, which is like $1. But then he denies it. He keeps on denying it, but then at the end he realized that homeless man was actually a god. But like it was too late for him to be forgiven. So yeah, I think it's very interesting to see how he visited like South Africa, which is like him saying his background, like home, I guess. And also in an interview, he said South Africa like took a huge part when making this album. So yeah, I think that was very interesting.
I didn't catch that. I think like I knew that like the guy who he was talking to was God because it says it in the lyrics.
Yeah,
But then, I mean, that makes me think of like all of the biblical references in this track. If the homeless guy is God, then what? Then who is Kendrick? And if he didn't
He's
give
supposed to
him,
be Moses, I think, from
and then
when he split the
then
sea.
and then if he didn't give him the dollar, then what does that mean? Does that mean that he wasn't selfless? And is he going to be like, I don't know, like harmed in a way because of that? Yeah, it's really interesting.
Maybe giving $1 is kind of cowardly. Like that's like how much is $1 worth? Like, is this dollar gonna change his life, or instead of giving $1, should he lead him to a new life?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Because in the track, he's saying, if I give you this dollar, like he's saying in his head, if I give him $1, he's just gonna buy some crack and smoke it and just stay on the street.
Yeah,
But then it turns out to be like God. So
yeah. I don't know if it's a Christian saying, but how God is like with us all. I don't know if this is the right way to say, it, but you should treat others like you treat God with respect and all that. Like Kendrick viewed this homeless guy as a homeless guy who's like gonna ruin his life, but like he's trying to say also is in Africa. Keep in mind, is in Africa, like saying that all these people around you, um, strangers to you, they're all brothers of you, brothers and sisters. So you got to take care of them like brothers and sisters.
Yeah, so yeah, that track, like I love the storytelling so much. It worked so like everything in this album just worked so well. It just I found no true flaws with this album. I loved how in like I mentioned this when we were speaking earlier, but it's not the studio version. It's like the live version where he's playing in front of a crowd. And I think that that not only adds to the whole raw, authentic vibe of the rest of the album, but it's also it also just fits well, like the energy that he's giving off in the live performance, and the track sort of is the light at the end of the tunnel in a way. I think that most of the tracks in this album, even the album cover, is very gray. It's very dark. It's very like sad in a way. I is sort of it's very upbeat. It's all about self love and like empowerment as a black man, and it's just sort of that relief after all of this stress about money, the rap game, girls, God, the devil trying to screw him over, and now it's just him just being content and saying like I love myself. It doesn't really matter anymore, and I love that track a lot. And then at the end, it's like the last minute of the track is him arguing with the crowd. Like the crowd is like yelling at him about something. I forgot. And then he's saying like he's like screaming. He's like I don't got time to make time. And I think that that line is great. And he goes on to say he's like I don't got time to make time. The judge make time. We don't make time. And I think that that also like obviously it shows how most of these black men who get sent to prison like are like their lives are in the hands of these white judges who most likely have a bias, and it's like that's not only like that's really sad to see, but I love how he says I don't got time to make time because it's all about doing stuff in the moment and just like doing life, like just do life. And I think that's a great message to sort of close the album out with.
You mentioned previously that like people are tempted by Lucy or Lucifer, right?
Hmm.
Well, I was when I listened to it, I kind of made a connection where I feel like so after I listened to For Nothing, I kind of noticed the similarities between Uncle Sam and Lucy, where like these Garden of Eden snake kind of temptations to like material pleasures, like the way Lucy does that is the same way Uncle Sam does that. And what I noticed about For Nothing is like if you listen to the track, it sounds kind of like fantasy music you listen to when you're a kid. And
On
like
yeah, on For Sale.
For Nothing, yeah. I mean, for yeah, and like something like a connection I made was like TV commercials, like they kind of um especially in the 80s and the 90s because they went through this phase where trying to make utopian they try to envision like utopian societies and all that, but like they had like this kind of futuristic sound like kind of fantasy sound, and from that I kind of noticed that oh wait, like Lucy's in a way Uncle Sam as well in the American society. Also, like if a devil's trying to tempt you, would he look like kind of like the scary thing, or would he try to look kind of nice and kind? Because in Wesley's theory, they try to portray Uncle Sam as this kind guy when he really isn't, right? And the same thing, it's like the music from Lucy also sounds clown music, where it's like it's all happy, but it's kind of scary, and
Yeah,
it's like it's too perfect, and that's something I noticed.
that's really interesting. I was thinking like almost the exact same thing. Like when I was listening to For Sale, he's saying all these lyrics like Lucy or like the devil's gonna screw you over, the devil's coming for you, and the music in the background it's like in Jesus. Like as you mentioned before, like he goes from these heavy 808s and this disgusting beat to this beautiful sample, and yeah, Wow, that's actually really interesting. That's a really good point about how the instrumental is almost like it's too happy for what
Yeah,
he's talking about. So like
yeah,
there's definitely something wrong.
yeah. Guess we could say one for one.
Yeah, the poem, like the whole structure, the story arc of the album is just amazing. Like he starts his rise on King Kunta, and then on these walls, he's sort of coming to terms with the restrictions that American society has on him because he is a black man. Like he's figuring out what the walls are, and he's feeling sort of sad because he can't go out and do other shit because of his skin color. It's just super unfortunate, and that's where the album gets a little sad. And then the tipping point of this sadness and these suicidal thoughts that Kendrick is feeling and this like deep feeling of depression is on You. And that track is sad as that track is so sad. This man, he says, loving you is complicated. And I think that applies to so many things. And he's just trying to figure it all out, but he can't. And he's frustrated. And then in the second half, we get a beat switch, and this guy is just crying. And he's literally sobbing and sniffling, and he's still rapping.
I
Go
think
into
he
the booth.
invented that flow,
Yeah. Who
the
would go
cry rap.
yeah, cry rap,
Yeah,
exactly.
cry rap.
Like who would go who would like for the sake of the album's theme and for the sake of portraying these suicidal thoughts accurately, who would go into the booth and just cry? No one.
Kendrick.
No one would do that.
Yeah,
And that's what makes this song just so raw. And when he's crying, he's saying like they shot this guy last week, and like you weren't with me since day one. Like you never loved me. I'm being screwed over. I can't do anything about my contract. All the people back home that like they don't see me as equal to them. They see me as this guy who got taken in by the rap game, and now I like he's not street anymore. And there's this big disconnect between them. And while he's saying all of this super heavy emotional shit, he's just crying throughout the entire thing. And then he continues on his journey. He interacts with Lucy, as Ronan said on For Sale, which is top three on the album for me. We move on to Hood Politics. Very, very, very interesting track. So basically, on like Hood Politics, there's this guy who's like talking to Kendrick through the phone. He's like, "Yo, K Dot, like they still got you on this like rap shit," in sort of a sarcastic way, which just shows how other people around him from his hood and from where he lives don't take him seriously as a rapper. That rap shit isn't meant for you. Like they're just gonna screw you over, and yet he still went into it, and that's when he lost most of his friends. And I think beautiful opening to the track. And Hood Politics is all about how he's experienced a lot of shit, a lot of his friends dying, a lot of like street shit, a lot of gang shit, and he's just there, just experiencing it all. And in a way, he feels this sense of survivor's guilt because he made it out. And making it out is such a big deal. And the fact that he was able to do it so easily because of rap, it's in a way he feels like he has to give back to his people, because then he will feel even worse inside. Like he's all the way up here and he's left everyone in the basement basically for like to die. And he doesn't want to feel that way, so he would always give back. Like he can give them money, cars, whatever they want. He can provide for them, his friends. But the one thing that he can't do is stop the street violence and stop them from being killed. Like this album is such a trip. If you play this on shuffle, you are a bastard. I swear. You cannot play this album on shuffle. That's like a crime. You have to start from like beginning to end, and you cannot skip, you cannot fast forward, you can't go back. You just got to listen.
yeah. But the only song you could kind of skip in a way to me is All Right. Like that's
Yeah.
kind of like a overarching song. And also You Ain't Gotta Lie, Mama Said, kind of like a meaningless song to the album. But I
Yeah,
feel like when albums have kind of trash songs, it allows other songs to shine better. Do you guys agree or not?
oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I
Do you
think
think like
that
rappers should have deliberately have trash songs? Like you never, whenever you're always listening to albums, you're like, oh, this is that trash song. It's like here's the trash song. Like
I don't think rappers should intentionally release like trash, but per se. But I think that
Grease. Baby.
Oh.
I, I think that it's okay to have some filler tracks. Like one or two is acceptable in maybe a 20 or 16 track album. But if you have like a short album, like 7 or 10 tracks, you cannot miss. Can we talk about the album cover for a sec? Like I'm just like looking at it on my phone. Like you got Kendrick and his whole crew chilling in front of what looks like the White House, and there's this judge or this like white man, old white man, who's just on the floor. His eyes are crossed out, which means something, which means something, right? Like through the eyes of like the white man, they would look dangerous. They would look like they're a threat to society. But I think that in line with the theme of the rest of the album and the title of To Pimp a Butterfly, like these kids who are from and it's Kendrick's friends, like these small kids and these like from 12 to 20, these guys are just products of their environment. I feel like this album cover is just showing first of all, he's like putting his whole hood on. Second of all, he's just saying like we don't really care like how you view us. We're gonna live our lives, and we're just like it's not our fault that we may do this or that because that's just how the environment that they grew up. Those are the walls, and like shout out to these walls that they like grew up in, and I don't know. I just think that the album cover is just great. It's so powerful.
like you know how you said these guys look kind of dangerous,
Yeah.
but like maybe like he doesn't want his like community to act like safe and almost kind of white, like where like kind of like even like they should become better people, but the culture should remain the same. And even if they become nice, kind, and like effective people in the capitalist economy, like that's you're just being played by Uncle Sam again, and he doesn't want that. So he wants the suffering to end, but he wants the culture to remain.
Yes. 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 Yeah, bro. You're like 2 for 2 now. I love the title of the album. Like it. I read somewhere that it was supposed to be "To Pimp a Caterpillar" because if the initials would read Tupac, which would be like whoa, right? But then he was like, no, that's corny as shit. So "To Pimp a Butterfly" it is because you go from the caterpillar to the cocoon, and there the cocoon is like the walls of the environment, and you're molded into this butterfly. And Kendrick is that butterfly who came out from as a product of his own environment, where there were guns, sex, violence, and he sort of came into his own. He's being pimped in a way that these labels are screwing him over. These like the rap game isn't treating him well. His people back home aren't treating him well. He's being tempted by all these gold chains, cars, girls, like all that, all of the perks that come with being a rapper. And this in this album, he's sort of commenting on how it is tempting and he wants to provide for his people, but at the same time, he doesn't want to give in to being pimped. Where you can get all of the benefits from being like a rapper and being like one of the most popular rappers in the industry and also being a family man, like providing for your people back home and just being happy with yourself. So I think that's where you find that line.
The least pimped butterflies are the ugliest butterflies, like moths. Like no one goes picking moths. It's all those colorful butterflies. Like that's kind of it's kind of reflective. Like name me one person. Yeah, bro. Kendrick is a moth.
After he dropped Good Kid, Mad City, my first thought was there is no way that he can top this album. There's no way. And then he
With the
did.
same topic, talking about the same topic.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. Because Good Kid, Mad City is Kendrick growing up and he's experiencing all of this, and To Pimp a Butterfly is him like reflecting on all this and sort of giving like a warning back to his own people. Like he goes from Good Kid, Mad City, where he made trap bangers like Swimming Pools and Poetic Justice and Money Trees, and then no, like I saw this interview with him in Soundwave, who's like the main producer for Tip and Butterfly, and he was talking about all these producers were they were sending him beats for like the new album, and they were sending all these trap beats, and him and Kendrick would just laugh because that's the complete opposite direction of where they were going with this album. No one knew that this was coming. No one reviewed it until like 2 weeks later because they needed to like digest it. He did an amazing, amazing job on this album.
And something I noticed was like in for To Pimp a Butterfly, he uses a lot of samples for choruses and like main melodies and all that. And I was wondering why, but maybe it's like to say that like we've been so distracted with materialistic hip hop that we've been ignoring like 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 the messages in To Pimp a Butterfly. They might be like expressed in a way we've never seen it, like heard it before, but the message is the same as we've been hearing from like ever since the civil rights movement, right? So what the saying is like by using like these old samples as choruses and main melodies and all that, like he's saying that this message has been like people have been saying this for so long, yet because you guys are listening to materialistic hip hop, you guys have been ignoring it.
Yeah, and like the thing I love about Kendrick and the thing that separates him from like J. Cole and shit like that is because he's not like, look at me, I am woke. You know, like J. Cole, like he's supposed to be like the woke rapper, the one who's sort of spitting all these woke bars, and he's like socially conscious or shit like that. But Kendrick, like he's so direct. His lyrics hold so much weight that you cannot treat any of Kendrick's albums like a normal rap album, which I love. Cool. Shall we give this album our final thoughts and a rating?
Yeah, I really like the instrumentals from for all of them. They're not trendy, but it really showed how he collaborated with different producers. And yeah, the poems really helped to foreshadow the next track, which really helped. And as I said before, I loved how he like shows different perspectives to show like like different thoughts what people have. So yeah, but some of the tracks were not as interesting. I feel like this album, you have to like listen like in order. Like they're 4 minutes plus, but it's better than like Drake's song where it's so repetitive and boring.
Maybe.
So yeah, with that in mind, I'll give it a 7 out of 10 for me.
This is very respectable. I think that this album, from idea to the final product, was executed beautifully. I think that all of the instrumentals were so layered and rich. I loved it so much. I never got bored. It wasn't like a loop, like a 4 bar loop. Um, I loved the live instrumentation. I loved the spoken word poetry. I loved how he caught everyone by surprise by doing a jazz album. I love all the influences. I loved every feature. I loved all the choruses. I loved the mix of bangers and sort of those like deeper tracks. I loved all of the themes. I loved how, even though I'm not black, obviously, and I can never truly understand what it means to be black, I can respect the art for what it is. And I think that in terms of that perspective, this is such a deep dive into what it's like to sort of live that lifestyle when he was in Compton. And I think just taking a look at that from the way that he's telling the stories and the way that he is just, it's so incredibly sad and it makes me feel some sort of way. I think the whole idea of pimping a butterfly is so beautiful in its own way. It could be a totally different concept. It could be its own product. It could be a movie. I think he executed everything beautifully. I was never bored of any tracks, even on my least favorite track on Momma Said. It was but it still added to the album in the way in which I wasn't bored. I just loved I pretty much loved everything about the album. The one thing that gets me though is I can only sit down I can only listen to this album if I sit down and listen to the entire thing. And that can go two ways. That is a positive for the album because it just shows how like Kendrick has us listening to albums again. Like albums, not singles or like shit on like the radio. He has us listening to like true albums, like front to back, no skips. I think that's dope. Personal enjoyment, I wouldn't go back to many of these tracks if I was just like chilling in my room or something, or just like I was like in a car. But that's not saying that I hate the album at all. I think this album was just incredible. Yeah, with that all in mind, I am settling for a 9.5.
Well, Arjun said I love for about like 10 times. But so I'll point out some negatives that I experienced. This was a very good album, but I'll point out some negatives. First thing was, as Arjun mentioned, how this album is so deep. You really have to dive, like, you can't superficially listen to it. Like, when I'm listening to the song, it's like I'm reading an English paper. Like, I might enjoy the contents, but I really have to put in some effort, and sometimes I don't want to put in that effort, like, in order to enjoy a song. And another thing for me is, like, to me, with all that, like, I know he didn't want to go for a trap sound and all that, but I felt like he could have had a little bit of more musical diversity and variety. And, like, some of the songs, like, I know, like, they were layered very, or in a very articulate manner, but I feel like he could have tried different sounds. With that in mind, the album was just amazing as well. The contents was amazing, and this is one of those albums where you're excited. Like, maybe it's because of the poem outro he does in the end, but like you're excited to hear the next song. Like, I haven't had one of those in a long time.
Exactly.
Yeah. For a Lil Pump album, are you excited to hear the next song? Probably not. So with that in mind, I'll give this album a 9.
Yeah, so that just about concludes our review of To Pimp a Butterfly. If you made it this far, which very few do, thank you very much. This podcast is also on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts, Amazon if they do podcasts, I don't know. We're also on YouTube, obviously, if you're watching this on YouTube. Don't be shy, comment, like, subscribe.
Yeah, we enjoy the comments.
We actually enjoy reading the comments a lot, and we love, like, if you have any opinions on the albums or songs that we're talking about, just like have a conversation with us, Yeah, or you can DM any of us individually on Instagram or wherever you find us. But yeah, we're having a lot of fun doing this, and we hope to continue this for at least the rest of the summer while we all have some free time while we're in quarantine. So yeah, just look forward to new episodes, and yeah, Kanye might drop, so we'll see how that goes. He's definitely not gonna drop, but
Stop the cap.
Yeah, cool. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your pets, and yeah, cool. Kendrick Lamar, To Pimp a Butterfly.
Hold up. Tell your pet.
And that's the end of the album review. Goodbye.
I be flyer than a bitch, I be flyer than a bitch. Please don't talk down on me, got pistola on my hip. I be flyer than a bitch, I be flyer than a bitch. Please don't talk down.